The curse of Kinu Valley. The wind that whispered through the trees of Kinu Valley always sounded like it was trying to speak. Zalika often imagined it was telling stories, old ones, forgotten by time. Her village, nestled at the edge of the valley, was a quiet place of clay huts, thick forest, and soil rich enough to grow anything. Or at least, it used to be. Now, everything was dying. The river, once full of silver fish, had thinned into a muddy trickle. The crops rotted before harvest, and children who once played barefoot in the sun now lay sick with fevers no herb could cure. The villagers stopped singing. The elders stopped smiling. And Mora, Zalika's grandmother, the village healer, had stopped sleeping. Zalika noticed it first. She'd wake in the night to see the old woman sitting near the fire, whispering to herself in a language Zalika didn't recognize. Her grandmother's hands, once steady and warm, now trembled even when grinding herbs. Something weighed on her, something Zalika wasn't allowed to know. That all changed the day the seer arrived. He came without warning, cloaked in rags made of feathers and bones. His eyes were clouded like smoke trapped in glass, and he walked like the earth pulled him in every direction. No one had seen a seer in generations, most believed they were myths. But the moment he stepped into the village, the wind changed. Children stopped crying. Chickens clucked nervously. Even the dogs hid under huts. The villagers gathered around him like leaves circling a storm. Without being asked, the seer raised one hand and pointed toward the valley. "The land is cursed," he said. His voice cracked like dry wood. "And the price has not yet been paid." The crowd murmured. Some wept. Others turned to Mora. Zalika didn't understand until her grandmother fell to her knees. That night, under a sky that refused to show stars, Mora told Zalika the truth. Many years ago, before Zalika was born, there was a famine worse than this one. The villagers had begun to starve. Babies were dying in their sleep. Mora, desperate and grieving, had wandered deep into the forbidden Kinu Valley. Everyone knew to stay awake, it was said to be the home of something old. Something hungry. But Mora didn't care. She had nothing left to lose. She called out to the spirits. She begged for life, for rain, for food. And something answered. The ebony serpent. King of shadows. Lord of scales and spirit. A being of ancient magic and terrible power. He offered her a deal: he would bless the land, make it fertile, green, alive. In return, Mora must promise him a bride from her own bloodline. Not then. Not soon. But when the time came. She agreed. And that promise was Zalika. Zalika couldn't breathe. Her hands shook. Her voice vanished. "You promised me," she whispered. "I was trying to save our people," Mora said, eyes full of tears. "You wouldn't have even been born if I hadn't made the deal. But now, the serpent is calling in the dead. And if we don't answer, this village will die." Zalika stood. Her legs felt made of ash. How could her grandmother, the woman who raised her, sang her lullabies, taught her how to read the stars, give her away like a sack of yams? But when she looked out the window and saw the sick children, the shriveled crops, the dry riverbed, she understood. This was no longer just her life. It was everyone's. At dawn, the entire village stood in silence as Zalika walked toward the valley path. She wore a white robe, the color of sacrifice. Her feet were bare. Her heart felt like a rock in her chest. Mora didn't come to say goodbye. But the seer was waiting at the edge of the valley. He handed her a staff carved from ebony wood, with a tiny serpent etched near the top. "This is your path now," he said softly. "But not all who are given away remain lost." Zalika said nothing. She stepped past the stone boundary and into the forbidden valley. The trees closed behind her. The wind began to speak again, but this time, she wasn't sure it was just telling stories. It felt like it was watching her, waiting into the serpent's domain. Zalika had never felt so small. The moment she crossed into the heart of Kinu Valley, the world changed. The air shimmered with colors she couldn't name. The trees were taller than any she'd seen, their trunks glowed faintly with runes that pulsed like heartbeats. Some trees whispered to her as she passed, their branches swaying in patterns that felt like language. At first, she thought it was a dream. But when the ground beneath her feet turned to soft, warm moss that hummed when she stepped, she knew she had entered the realm of the ebony serpent. She was in the serpent's domain now. Zalika walked for hours, or maybe days. Time didn't behave normally here. The sky was a swirl of lavender and silver, and the moon never seemed to move. Creatures stared at her from the shadows, some with glowing eyes, others with too many legs, or none at all. A deer with feathers instead of fur walked beside her for a while, then vanished into smoke. And then she met him. He slithered down from a tree, slow and silent, half man, half serpent. His skin shimmered like oil, scales running up his arms and neck. His face, though sharp and strange, held something gentle. "You are Zalika," he said. His voice was like a drum underwater. "The promised one." "And you are?" she asked, trying not to step back. "I am Njoru, first son of His Majesty. I will guide you." He didn't offer a hand. Instead, he turned and walked down a path lined with blue fireflies that hovered in place. "Come," he said without looking. "The king awaits." The palace of scales rose from the valley floor like a mountain made of jade. Its towers twisted into the sky like coiled snakes, their tips biting the clouds. Waterfalls of gold poured from its walls, and enormous serpent statues lined the gates, eyes glowing red. Inside, everything shimmered. The floors were polished obsidian, the walls carved with stories, serpents coiled around women, warriors, gods. The air smelled of incense and something older. Something deep. Zalika was taken to a room so grand it felt like a trap. Silken robes. Jewels. A bed carved from a single tree. Food appeared on a golden tray, fruits that sang, meat that sizzled without fire, water that tasted like memory. "You are honored," Njoru said. "Treated as the bride of a king." "But I never agreed to marry anyone," she snapped. "The agreement was made by blood. And blood does not lie." Zalika hated that answer. She explored the palace when Njoru wasn't watching. Every corridor led to something strange, a hall of mirrors that showed her as a child, an old woman, and something scaled. A garden of glass flowers that screamed when touched. A room full of caged shadows. But the strangest was the hall of brides. It was quiet. Cold. Lit by floating orbs that flickered like candlelight. Painted murals lined the walls, each showing a girl like her, wearing white robes. Some smiled. Others cried. One or two looked like they were screaming, trapped behind the paint. Zalika counted at least 12. 12 brides. None of them ever mentioned in the stories. And none of them ever seen again. That night, she met the king. Olyom, the ebony serpent himself, sat upon a throne that looked alive. His body was enormous, serpentine, but crowned with the head of a man, wise, stern, hauntingly beautiful. His eyes were yellow and endless. "Zalika," he said softly. "So much like her, your grandmother." Zalika flinched. "You knew Mora." "I still know her. She may have run, but the blood speaks." He didn't rise. He didn't hiss. There was no menace in his voice, only a deep sadness, and something even more dangerous, hope. "You were born not just to pay a debt," he said, "but to fulfill a destiny. My curse can only be broken through a bond of pure blood and pure sacrifice." "You mean marriage?" she asked, heart pounding. "I mean ritual," he said. "You were always meant to awaken the power that sleeps inside you. When it rises, so will I, reborn from the prison the gods placed on me. And if I refuse? He smiled slowly. Then your soul will remain in this palace, like the others. Frozen in time. Forgotten by your word. Zalika left the throne room in silence. Her footsteps echoed louder than they should have. Later that night, in her chamber, one of the servants, a woman with serpent eyes, slipped a note under her door. It read only 3 words. Do not trust. Zalika didn't sleep. She stared out the window at the silver rivers and the dark sky, at the palace where shadows moved too quickly. The king said she was special. Chosen. Blessed. But so were the other brides. And none of them made it home. Whispers in the marble walls. The palace of the ebony serpent never slept. Its halls pulsed with quiet magic, sighs in the walls, lights that flickered like blinking eyes. Even the silence had weight, like something waiting just behind it. Zalika tried to rest, but her dreams had other plans. Each night, the same vision returned. A woman stood in a room of black stone, her eyes glowing like coals. Her voice echoed like wind through a hollow god. Do not trust the king. Look beneath the altar. Then fire. Screams. And silence. Zalika woke every morning gasping, clutching the amulet she now wore around her neck, a gift from Njoro. Or maybe a leash. The palace wanted her to feel like a queen. But she felt more like a ghost in waiting. She began to listen, not to the courtiers or the serpent guards, but to the walls. The strange carvings on the marble whispered when touched. Old symbols shifted when you looked away. Footsteps echoed oddly, as if the halls remembered every person who ever walked them. That's when she met Tika. A young servant, maybe a year older than her. Quick hands. Sharp eyes. And anger buried deep behind every polite nod. He didn't speak to her at first, not until she accidentally knocked over a basket of scrolls he was carrying. These are records, he hissed. You can't just toss them around. I'm sorry, she said, flustered. I didn't know. Tika paused. Looked at her. Then narrowed his eyes. You're her, aren't you? The new bride. Zalika hesitated. Then nodded. My name is Zalika. And I'm the brother of one of the old ones. The ones who didn't come back. That caught her breath. Tika said his sister, Emoya, had been brought to the palace years ago. Promised safety. Promised honor. Last seen walking into the chamber beneath the altar for the blessing ritual. No one ever saw her again. But Tika stayed. Found a way into the palace ranks. And waited. I don't have proof, he said. Not yet. But I know the king is hiding something. And if you're smart, you'll help me find out what. Late one night, they slipped away from the guest wing, beneath the golden serpent statues, into the underbelly of the palace, a maze of tunnels and roots and old stone. Tika carried a flickering lamp. Zalika held the amulet like a blade. They came to a door covered in carvings, all in the shape of women's faces. The expressions were calm. Too calm. Zalika touched the center. The door opened. The smell hit them first, old bones, dried blood, and flowers long dead. The room beyond was silent, secular, and lined with broken mirrors and scattered jewelry. Rings, earrings, necklaces, all with names etched into the metal. Names of brides. A pile of bones lay neatly arranged in the center. A ritual circle surrounded it, bound into the floor with symbols that moved when stared at. Zalika felt her knees weaken. How many? She whispered. Too many, Tika replied. And I think you're next. They confronted King Olium the next day. Zalika stormed into the throne room, eyes blazing. You lied to me, she snapped. The king raised an eyebrow. Come. Unbothered. Did I? What is the ritual really for? Why the bones? Why the lies? He rose, towering, elegant, terrifying, but not angry. Zalika, he said gently. You are not like the others. The ritual failed before because they were not ready. But you are born from the first promise. You carry the blood of the woman who made the deal. Zalika stepped back. My grandmother. Olyom nodded. Mora was meant to stay. But she ran. And the magic fractured. You, however, could restore it. Heal it. Rule beside me, as more than a bride. As queen. As equal. Zalika didn't answer. She left without another word. Because something he said, something about her blood, didn't sit right. That night, she returned to the Hall of Brides alone. But this time, she looked closely. She pressed her hands against a section of wall near a faded mural, a girl with braided hair and a necklace like her own. She whispered a word that came to her in a dream. Marocca. The wall shifted. Behind it, a small room. Dusty. Forgotten. And carved into the stone, in bold old script. Mora. First bride. Marked but unbroken. Zalika stared. Her grandmother had been here. Not just to make a deal. But to become the very first sacrifice, the serpent's truth. Zalika sat in the hidden chamber, tracing her fingers over her grandmother's name. Mora. First bride. Marked but unbroken. The carvings told more than the story she'd been told her whole life. Images danced across the stone walls, Mora, young and beautiful, walking into the palace. Standing before the ebony serpent. Kneeling in the ritual circle, pregnant. Then running. The last image chilled Zalika, Mora fleeing the palace under a bleeding moon, carrying a newborn in her arms. That child was not me. Zalika stumbled back, her heart thudding. She didn't just escape, she whispered. She stole something. A voice behind her broke the silence. She stole you. King Olyom stood in the doorway, robes dark as midnight, eyes glowing with sorrow and certainty. You were born here. Conceived in magic. Raised among mortals who never understood what you are. What am I? She asked, throat tight. He stepped closer, his serpent tail gliding softly over the floor. You are my daughter. Zalika didn't remember walking back to her chamber. The word spun. Her thoughts felt like birds crashing against a window. His daughter. She remembered Mora's stories, always vague, always careful. How she said Zalika's mother had died. How no one ever talked about her father. The king had no reason to lie now, not about this. She looked at herself in the mirror, the amber flicker in her eyes, the way the palace whispered to her more loudly each day. The way she could sense what others were thinking if she focused hard enough. Latent powers, Olyom had called them. Magic born from our bloodline, sealed when your mother fled. And now the ritual, the one she feared would destroy her, was actually meant to awaken her. You were never meant to die, he said. You were meant to rise. She met Tika and Joru near the eastern tower, where the rebellion had been secretly gathering strength. Tika's face darkened when he saw her. He told you, didn't he? She nodded. He's my father. That doesn't change what he's done, Tika snapped. My sister's bones are still in that chamber. Dozens of women sacrificed just to test his ritual. And what if it works this time? She asked. What if I can fix it, stop the cycle without war? Joru stepped forward. His serpent eyes narrowed. Even if he believes he's saving the realm, his reign is soaked in blood. You think your powers will be safe from his control? Zalika looked between them. Her heart ached in every direction. So what's the plan? She asked. Tika pulled out a scroll. A rebellion was coming, not just angry servants, but forest spirits, old magic, even talking beasts who once fled the serpent's rule. They would strike during the ritual. Destroy the king. Free the palace. And if I stand with him, she asked. Then we'll have to fight you too, Tika said coldly. The night of the ritual arrived. The palace was eerily calm. Stars blinked like eyes, watching. The hall of spirits had been prepared, glowing crystals, floating symbols, serpent statues leaking golden mist. The ritual circle at the center pulsed with energy. Zalika entered in silence. The king stood across from her, his robes curled like shadows, arms open. Are you ready, my daughter? He asked. Zalika nodded. But not because she was certain. Because there were no more certainties left. The rebels waited in the shadows. Tika, Njoro, and the spirits ready to strike. The king raised his arms. The circle lit up, blinding. Zalika stepped forward, one foot into the circle. Magic surged through her like fire and thunder. Visions slammed into her, brides screaming, spirits howling, gods watching from above. And then, darkness. Everything fell silent. The light vanished. Zalika's body froze. And the world held its breath. Flames of freedom. Zalika opened her eyes. The room was no longer the Serpent King's palace. It was somewhere deeper, older. A place that pulsed with ancient magic and memory. Her body floated above the ritual circle, her skin glowing faintly. Her eyes, no longer brown, burned like twin suns. Every word spoken by the walls, the wind, even the stones beneath her, made sense now. She could speak the old tongue. And with it came clarity. Visions poured into her like a tidal wave. Her father, King Olyom, once noble, once desperate to save his people, betrayed by the gods for stealing forbidden knowledge. Cursed to a serpent's form. Promised a second chance through love. But love had long since curdled into vengeance. The ritual wasn't to break his chains, it was to bind the gods in new ones. Zalika dropped to the ground, the magic now flowing through her veins like fire made of memory. And far above, the palace began to shake. The rebellion had arrived. Spirits of the forest burst through the marble gates, wolves wreathed in shadow, birds of living flame, even trees that walked with thunder in their steps. Njoro led the charge, striking down snake guards with venom of his own. Tika, blade in hand, fought his way to the altar chamber. Zalika, he yelled through the chaos. Where are you? A deafening roar echoed through the halls. The ebony serpent had risen. Olyom no longer wore his human face. He towered over the battle as a massive, coiled god-beast, black scales, eyes like lightning, fangs long as spears. You dare rise against me, he thundered. The ground split. Fire erupted from beneath. The pass screamed with every gust of wind. But Zalika stepped forward. Not as a servant. Not as a daughter. Not as a bride. You don't want to free the world, she said. You want to rule it in chains. The final battle began beneath the altar, where so many brides had fallen before. Zalika raised her hands, and the spirits of those lost answered. One by one, they appeared, Emoya, Adis, Dolia. 12 women, cloaked in silver fire. They stood behind her, silent but powerful. You fed on their lives, Zalika whispered. Now, they feed me. The air cracked like thunder. She and Olyom collided, light against shadow, truth against tyranny. His magic lashed like a whip, but Zalika's rose like a tide, ancient and pure. She spoke the old tongue. By truth, I rise. By fire, I end. By blood, I break the chains. Light exploded. The serpent screamed. The sky tore open, and the curse shattered like glass. When the dust cleared, the palace was in ruins. The golden towers had fallen. The marble floor was cracked. But the sun shone down again on Kinuvali, real sun, not the false light conjured by Olyum's magic. Zalika knelt beside her father's true form, no longer monstrous, but a man. A man broken by sorrow, twisted by grief. I wanted to give them everything, he whispered. But I lost everything. Zalika didn't reply. She closed his eyes and let him go. In the days that followed, the valley changed. The spirits no longer hid. The river flowed again, wide and clear. Crops grew where bones had once been buried. Songs returned to the wind. Zalika stood at the edge of the altar, the symbol of the serpent now replaced by a glowing tree, one she had carved from her own magic. Tika approached her. You really are the queen now. Not queen, she said softly. Guardian. He smiled. Still sounds powerful to me. They say she still walks the edge of Kinuvali, where dreams speak and trees remember. That she listens when you whisper into the wind. That she wears a crown made of light, and carries the names of every bride who came before her. Not as a prisoner, but as a protector. Born of betrayal, forged in fire, and crowned with truth. Zalika, the last bride. The first flame.